Chapter 91. The probability of successful surgery is the same as the Chinese national football team W. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the first-class cabin, the flight attendant in black stockings was enthusiastically asking the guests what they would like to eat later. The person she spoke to was an old man with gray hair wearing a suit and glasses. Lin Xie was a little surprised to meet Academician Chen here. Academician Chen. Lin Xie took the initiative to say hello. Academician Chen is a master of liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. When it comes to age, Lin Xie has to call him senior. Of course, in terms of status, the two of them are not much different. They are both pillars and guiding lights in their respective fields. Professor Lin, nice to meet you. Academician Chen also recognized Lin Xie, stood up staggeringly, and shook hands with Lin Xie kindly. After takeoff, Lin Xie took the initiative to chat. Mr. Chen, I have rarely seen you on business trips in the past few years. Academician Chen squinted his eyes, rubbed his temples and said, yes, I have rarely left the province in the past 2 years. I am not used to flying, and my old bones can't move. You are this time. A few days ago, that kid Gao Peian told me that he met a young man on the Linhai side who taught himself U-shaped anatomy. He is said to be even better than him. He can't help but let me go and take a look. The U-shaped anastomosis is naturally the Chen's pancreatic intestinal penetrating U-shaped anastomosis method pioneered by Academician Chen. Lin Xie had heard about this anastomosis technique, which was famous for its difficulty and originality in Daxiao. He was surprised and said, can you learn this technique by yourself? Can you do it better than your students? Academician Chen smiled and said, I'm curious too, so I went to take a look. By the way, what about you? Why aren't you busy working on new technologies? Lin Xie, I'm similar to you. There's also a genius in bone reconstruction emerging from Linhai. His surgical and scientific research skills are very high. Academician Chen was surprised. Oh. That's rare. There aren't many doctors who walk on 2 legs. Lin Xie, that's why I went there in person. In order to see him, I even turned down the discussion meeting on the 9th edition of Daxia Skeleton Reconstruction Standard Diagnosis and Treatment Plan. Academician Chen smiled so much that his face was filled with wrinkles and said, aren't you the drafter? Yes, class is about to start. Everyone is here, but I, the teacher, am absent. Academician Chen pushed up his glasses, his eyes were a little deep, and he said, it seems that Linhai City is really full of outstanding people. Lin Xie nodded in agreement. Yes, 2 geniuses appeared at the same time. Linhai Feng Shui is good. The two did not continue the discussion. In their view, hepatobiliary, pancreatic and bone reconstruction are 2 fields that are almost completely unrelated to each other. Naturally, the geniuses they are looking for will only be different people. Linhai No. 1 Hospital, Emergency Department. After a busy morning, Dr. Su finally took a short break. Back in the office, a pyramid was piled on his desk. There are plums, marshmallows, Oreos, seaweed, beef jerky, white rabbit. Next to it, there is also a pyramid on Wang Fan's table. There are 11 beds of medical records, 13 beds of medical records, 21 beds of medical records, 26 beds of medical records. Xu Qiu just sat down, and before he could take a bite of his rice, the beautiful female Dr. Yunmei appeared at the door. Dr. Su. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Xu Qiu eating and stopped talking. Dr. Su, please finish your meal first. This matter is not urgent. Yunmei felt distressed when she saw that Xu Qiu wanted to eat in person. Tell me. Xu Qiu said. You eat first, then talk about it when you're full. Xu Qiu finished a box of lunch in 3 mouthfuls. Yunmei's eyes were bright. Dr. Su is so enterprising. Say it. There is a consultation at the brain surgery department. Director Wang asked me to call you to attend. In a few minutes. Yunmei glanced at her watch. In another 15 minutes. Xu Qiu thanked her and rushed to the brain surgery department. In the emergency department office, Wang Fan was also working. Suddenly, Lu Susu stuck her head out and shouted, Wang Fan, go quickly. The newly admitted patient 24 suddenly complained of back pain. Wang Fan finished the meal in 3 mouthfuls. Yunmei wrinkled her nose. Oh, how rude. Wang Fan was stunned for a moment, then stared blankly in the direction Xu Qiu was going, tears streaming down his face. Damn, why? At this time, Xu Qiu also arrived at the floor outside his head. Brain surgery is actually neurosurgery. There is no essential difference between the two departments, except that the term brain is more convenient and can be regarded as a common name. Neurosurgery, on the other hand, is the official name of most hospitals. Xu Qiu came here with ease. As soon as he got off the elevator, he saw a group of family members surrounding the office. Xu Qiu was a little surprised. This scene is so similar to the one in the emergency department last night. The little boy knelt on the ground and kowtowed. There was a middle-aged woman next to her, and 3 or 4 old people were wiping their tears and pleading. Xu Qiu recognized the other party. They were really the family who begged for mercy in the emergency department last night. Xu Qiu, you are here. Deputy Director Zhao happened to see Xu Qiu in the office, and he sighed heavily. You come in first, we all have to attend the consultation, we can't get out right now. Deputy Director Zhao was full of helplessness. Xu Qiu nodded and went in to understand the situation. This family member was brought here from the emergency department last night, and the CT results came out that night. The plain CT scan showed that the tumor was slightly high density or ISO dense, and the enhanced scan showed that the tumor was significantly enhanced, with a clear boundary with the surrounding brain tissue, and varying degrees of cerebral edema around the tumor. That night, all the doctors on duty in the emergency department died. The next day, he was rushed outside the brain and underwent an MRI, magnetic resonance. Further MRI results showed, the lesions showed slightly long T1 and long T2 signals, with obvious enhancement. The base is located on the anterior clinoid process, the medial side of the lesser wing of the sphenoid bone, and the greater wing of the sphenoid bone. The tumor diameter is 5.5 centimeters, and the maximum diameter can be 11.2 centimeters. Diagnosed, huge meningioma at the base of the skull fossa. The patient's tumor was almost the size of an adult's fist. Anyone with medical knowledge knows that this situation is almost like death. For patients, living one more day means they are lucky. Want a cure? Although the diagnosis and treatment standards state that surgical treatment is possible, however, clinically, 99% of such extremely large tumors are treated conservatively. Most doctors don't know how to operate. The reason is that the risks of surgery are too high. Desperately high. It's a blessing to say that the success rate is 10%. The success rate of the operation is approximately equal to the men's football team's probability of winning the World Cup. Deputy Director Zhao sighed heavily and said, "This patient's name is Su Shun. He is 42 years old. He runs a restaurant, is both a chef and the owner, and he is the breadwinner of his family. One child in the family is in high school, and there is another child outside. There are 4 old people on it. The whole family is counting on him alone." You said, how can such a big tumor be operated on? It is better to bet that he can live forever with conservative treatment. Who can do it? There's no way anyone would dare to have an operation. Xu Qiu silently glanced at his system panel. Masterclass neuroendoscopic resection of skull-based tumors. What a coincidence. System, are you Conan? Besides, there is one more thing. Oh, it really tortures me to death. Deputy Director Zhao sighed one after another and stopped talking. What's the matter? Xu Qiu asked. Chapter 92. The surgery cannot be performed. No one can do it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Deputy Director Zhao looked at the door of the office. A trace of weakness flashed in his eyes, and said, "That child has been kneeling at the door all night." It's not just the patient's children. Earlier today, my haggard wife and 4 old men with gray hair on their temples all took turns kneeling before the brain surgeon. During this period, a doctor who had just been hired as a deputy director almost gave up and agreed to perform the operation. Let's not talk about this anymore. It's almost time. Let's go to the consultation first. Deputy Director Zhao looked at the time, looked at the family members worriedly, and finally said helplessly, "Extra brain meeting room." This time the attendees were all old acquaintances. During the tracheoesophageal fistula surgery, Director Lin and Zhongwan, who were Xu Qiu's assistants, were the attending doctors. Deputy Director Zhao and resident Dr. Shanyu had doubts about their life after having a brain tumor removed, but this time, the arrogant Zhong Wan and the unconvinced Shanyu all nodded proactively when they saw Xu Qiu again, with kindness in their eyes. Wang Ping, who was sitting next to Xu Qiu, naturally noticed this subtle change. He smiled and said, although our medicine cannot escape many shortcomings in academia, at least in the circle of peers, if the surgery is done well, it can win the respect of most people. The surgical skills are good, the nurses can provide easy postoperative care, and colleagues can use him as a backup. The two chatted for a few words, then the consultation speaker knocked on the table, and the consultation began. Patient Su Shun, a 42-year-old male, suffered from chronic illness, chief complaint, change in temperament for half a year, sudden convulsions and confusion for more than 3 days. Physical examination, drowsiness, confused response, passive posture, pupils on both sides of the same circle, about 2.5 mm in diameter, and slow light reflex. Imaging examination, diagnosis, sphenoidal crest meningioma. Su Shun's condition is so clear that a huge mass can be seen on CT and MRI. Even ordinary people can tell that something is wrong. Looking at the video on the screen, the doctors were silent for a while. With such a huge tumor, it is not too much to ask the family to prepare for the funeral now. You can't survive for a few days with conservative treatment, and this time bomb will explode at any time, and surgery, the difficulty is too high. The first is that the tumor is too huge, so much so that it is tightly adherent to nerves, blood vessels, brainstem, hypothalamus and other parts, and its separation is extremely complicated. In addition, the internal carotid artery, middle cerebral artery, and anterior cerebral artery and their branches are located near the tumor. There are also important neurovascular structures such as the optic nerve, oculomotor nerve, and olfactory nerve. A little carelessness will aggravate the damage to the brain and cranial nerves, causing massive bleeding during the operation. The traditional skull base approach requires sawing off a large piece of skull. The incision is large, the trauma is large, the exposure is extensive, and the chance of nerve damage is high. Moreover, Su Shun's tumor was so large that it pressed a lot of brain tissue, blood vessels, nerves, etc. to the edge of the skull. If the traditional approach was used, when the skull was sawed, several pieces of the brain would be randomly taken away. Therefore, the only option currently available is minimally invasive surgery, but the difficulty is also prohibitive. Like a raw egg in a narrow-mouth bottle, the raw eggs also had spider webs that stuck to the inside of the bottle. The surgeon must insert the tweezers through the narrow mouth of the bottle and then peel the raw eggs. During the process, first, the integrity of the shell membrane must be ensured. That is, the egg shell is peeled off without damaging the inner membrane and without any leakage of egg liquid. Second, you must pass through the intricate spider web and peel off the outer eggshell while ensuring that the spider web is not damaged. The atmosphere in the conference room was particularly depressing. This operation doesn't mean much. Someone suddenly said. Everyone looked at each other and nodded solemnly. Director Lin, Deputy Director Zhao and other senior department officials also looked unhappy. Just when everyone was about to give up, a nurse suddenly came in. She said a few words in Director Lin's ear. Director Lin frowned and looked towards the door of the conference room. Everyone looked at it and were shocked. At some point, Su Shun's youngest son was already kneeling at the door. He still had innocence and childishness on his face. He didn't understand what he was doing. He only knew that the doctor can save daddy. Beside him, 4 old men with wrinkled faces were trembling, holding on to the door frame and trying to kneel down. At this moment, someone finally couldn't sit still. Let's do it, Director, I'll do the surgery. Everyone in the brain surgery department changed their expressions and looked at the speaker at the same time. It's Deputy Director Genius, born in a rural area. He is handsome and personable. He is a talent returned from overseas at public expense. He was promoted to Deputy Director just this year. He is a talented young doctor in the brain surgery department. Wow! Outside the door, hearing Deputy Director Jean speak, the family burst into tears and finally saw hope. Director Lin quickly called several nurses and doctors to come over and take the family members back to the ward. After closing the door of the conference room again, Director Lin's face turned completely cold. Genius, who asked you to agree? Director Lin's beard was trembling with anger. Director, my father is the same as Xu Qiu. He drove a truck and supported our family. As a result, he died of illness at the age of 43. I couldn't bear to see the same tragedy happen to another family. GeniusProtagonist clenched his fists and said, he looked at his hand and said, besides, the disease I focus on is meningioma, I can give it a try. Director Lin slammed the table and cursed, try? What do you have to try? You spent more than 10 years studying for a doctorate in medicine, and only today are you qualified to stand in front of the operating table. Are you so anxious to ruin your future? Deputy Director Zhao also sighed. Although they are both deputy directors, GeniusProtagonist is 7 years younger than him and can be considered a junior. He stood up, patted GeniusProtagonist on the shoulder, and talked about a past story. 11 years ago, Director Lin had a very talented student. The other party also graduated from a prestigious university with a doctorate, and became a deputy director at the age of 34. He had a good chance to succeed Director Lin and even led the neurosurgery department of Linhai First Hospital to become one of the top 20 neurosurgery departments in the country. As a result, he encountered a case similar to Xu Qiu. The family members also begged desperately, and even people from the same village came to kneel down and ask for help. Director Lin's student softened his heart, agreed, and performed the operation. The operation was later completed. One good news, one bad news. The good news is that there is no risk. The bad news is that the person died along with the risk. At that moment, the doctor who brought hope to the family members suddenly became the incarnation of the devil. The admiration for the doctor turned into spitting, scolding, bloodshot eyes and white fists. Later, after the lawsuit and the court hearing, the student that Director Lin had cultivated with all his efforts was eventually revoked of his professional qualification certificate and bid farewell to the medical industry. After Deputy Director Zhao finished speaking, he sat down again and said, sometimes, family members are more like patients than patients. As a doctor, it is not wrong to put the patient's life first, but you must also remember that while protecting the patient, you must also protect yourself. Director Lin sighed. He would not let a genius dim because of this. With a little indifference, he said, I will talk to the family members again. This operation is unnecessary, don't talk about us. Even Tiandu Tiantan Hospital, which is one of the 3 major brain surgery centers in the world and ranks first in brain surgery in Daxiao, can't do it. This operation can't be performed, no one can do it. Xu Qiu was a little restless, no one can do it. Chapter 93, shocked one after another, he turned out to be an all-round genius. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I can do it. Just when the conference room was extremely quiet, a calm voice suddenly sounded. Everyone's heart was in their throat. Who dares to challenge the director at this time? Director Lin's face changed instantly. He looked angrily, but when he saw that it was Xu Qiu who stood up, his expression froze for a moment, and the words of reprimand suddenly stuck in his throat. You don't want to make trouble with him. GeniusProtagonist is a genius in brain surgery, and you are a rising star in emergency. You can't afford to make mistakes. Xu Qiu looked calm and had a convincing temperament. He said, try it. Director Lin was silent. He would not allow others to take risks in this operation. Once on stage, it is 9 out of 10 times 1 for 1. Use the patient's life in exchange for the doctor's career. But, when Xu Qiu said this, Director Lin hesitated a little. He couldn't see through Xu Qiu. If it can really be saved, which doctor doesn't want to let all patients leave the hospital healthy? How sure are you? At this moment, the always strict Director Lin relaxed a little. Xu Qiu said in a safe tone, 60%. 0.6%. Everyone present was shocked. Xu Qiu can be 60% sure of this operation. Even Director Lin didn't dare to say that he had a 10% success rate when he went on stage. Director Lin's voice changed a little, and he stared and said, 60%. Can you really do it? Zhongwen was also surprised. It's really Dr. Xu. Shen Shanyu raised his head with admiration on his face. Too awesome. At this moment, GeniusProtagonist was a little confused. He is the genius doctor of neurosurgery. Why did all the colleagues in the department go to worship Xu Qiu? At this time, Xu Qiu, who was the focus of the conference room, nodded lightly and said, arrange the operation. Director Wang. Wang Ping understood, okay, I'll sign. He was interrupted by Director Lin halfway through his words, saying, Director Wang, I will take responsibility for the operation. Since I allowed it, the consequences will naturally be borne by me. Wang Ping looked at Director Lin deeply. After so many years, this old man Lin still loves the younger generation so much, ding-ling-ling. Suddenly, Wang Ping's phone rang. At the same time, Linhai First Hospital, Academician Chen and Lin Xie came here almost one after another. When they saw each other, they showed surprised expressions. Mr. Chen, why are you here? Professor Lin, what are you doing? The two looked at each other, and an idea popped into their minds. Are the geniuses we are looking for all from Linhai First Hospital? That the two blurted out. Then, they laughed loudly. Academician Chen said, I didn't expect that after chatting all the way, our final destination is here. Lin Xie joked, if I had known this, I would have taken your special car to come here. That the two walked into the hospital together. Academician Chen looked at the sign of Linhai First Hospital and sighed, I didn't expect that such a small hospital by the sea would produce leaders in our two fields at the same time. Lin Xie nodded, and he joked again, saying, Mr. Chen, we are looking for the same person again. Oh, I'm going to the digestive department, are you going to the digestive department too? It seems that it's not the same person, I'm going to the emergency department. Academician Chen wondered, emergency department. Lin Xie also felt unbelievable and said, yes, who would have thought that the one who could achieve such a level of bone reconstruction was actually a young doctor in the emergency department. Academician Chen's eyes showed doubts and curiosity, I want to meet this genius. However, he still had business to do. Academician Chen called Director Xiao of the digestive department. The beeping sounded for a long time, and the other end was always busy. It seems that the operation has begun. It's just right. How about I go with you to see this orthopedic genius in the emergency department? Of course, as long as you don't compete with me for this guy, there will be no problem. Academician Chen narrowed his eyes and said kindly, don't worry, I'm not interested in this guy in the emergency department. I'm a hepatobiliary and pancreatic specialist, why would I need an orthopedic genius? The two laughed a few times, and then Lin Xie called Wang Ping. Director Wang. How did you know I came to see Xu Qiu? You are in the neurosurgery consultation, it's just right, Academician Chen and I will go over to take a look. 10 minutes later, neurosurgery meeting room, Lin Xie and Academician Chen quietly came in from the back door. At this time, the meeting room was still discussing. The operation had been confirmed before, and the specific implementation plan of the operation was still being discussed. Seeing the two people come in, Director Lin, Wang Ping, Deputy Director Zhao and others nodded in greeting. These two are both leading figures in the domestic medical community, and naturally very well known. Lin Xie pointed to Academician Chen about Xu Qiu. Academician Chen was a little surprised. So young. And he has an outstanding temperament. He is also very studious. I guessed correctly that this operation should be endoscopic neuroresection of skull-based tumors. It is extremely difficult. He is a young doctor, but he listens so carefully. Wow, he is still taking notes. No wonder he is so good. Academician Chen appreciated him very much. Lin Xie glanced at him and his face looked a little strange. Why doesn't he seem to be taking notes? There were several plans clearly listed above, and none of them had been mentioned at the meeting. Could this guy be the person in charge of this operation? Another 15 minutes passed. In the neurosurgery conference room, the surgical plan was finally finalized. Everyone looked in one direction at the same time, waiting for the final announcement. Lin Xie turned his head stiffly and looked at Xu Qiu at the end of his sight. Academician Chen was still a little surprised. Give young people a chance to speak, but only the main surgeon can sort out the surgical plan and process clearly. As he spoke, he suddenly realized that the expressions around him were wrong. That was not the look of looking at a rookie doctor. Everyone's eyes were solemn, expectant, and a little awe. At this moment, Xu Qiu stood up and calmly determined the final plan: neuroendoscopic resection of skull-based tumors, frontal keyhole approach. After the meeting, Academician Chen still opened his mouth wide, with a look of disbelief. Lin Xie also sat beside him in a daze. Director Lin, Wang Ping and others came to entertain them. Seeing that the two were shocked, they couldn't help but smile. Suddenly, Academician Chen's phone rang. He took out his mobile phone and answered it. However, Academician Chen's next sentence surprised everyone present, and then his face became very strange. If you want me to update more, please leave a comment. If there are 50 people, I will add one update, that is, 4 updates tomorrow. Chapter 94. The operation begins, and my home court is here. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hey, Director Xiao, where is the genius of Chen's anastomosis? Lead me to see him. Academician Chen just finished speaking. However, he found that the expressions of Director Lin, Wang Ping and others around him suddenly became very strange, and at the same time they looked in the direction Xu Qiu left. Academician Chen's eyes widened, his heart pounded, and his breathing became a little faster. He asked tentatively, Director Xiao, is that genius named Xu Qiu? Director Xiao, hey, has Professor Gao told you? Yes, his name is Xu Qiu, and he is a doctor in the emergency department. Although it sounds outrageous, it is absolutely true. You must believe it. I believe it. I'm telling you, Xu Qiu's skills are like a ghost. Ah. Do you believe it? Director Xiao was stunned for a moment. Why is it so fast? I haven't started to play yet. Academician Chen hung up the phone tremblingly and picked up the teacup. Pat ta 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 ta. The teacup kept shaking, and the warm tea spilled all over the table. What did I hear? An emergency physician. The surgical level of bone reconstruction is close to that of Lin Xie. Chen's anastomosis is second only to his, and the pancreatic debridement is perfect. Can we still perform the extremely difficult neuroendoscopic resection of skull-based tumors? Am I Alzheimer's? Chen Yusher wiped the sweat from his face and said in disbelief. Wang Ping sat down and hesitated. Actually. Academician Chen slowly turned his head, and a few rays of light shone in his old eyes. Actually, he is just a genius packaged by your hospital. Wang Ping shook his head. Actually, he can also perform laparoscopy, cardiac repair, artificial blood vessel replacement, superconducting intervention to remove high-risk foreign bodies, and skin flap transplantation. Lin Xie took a sip of tea, suppressed his shock, and said silently, Mr. Chen, you said before that you would not compete with me for Xu Qiu. As I get older, I always talk nonsense. Alas, I have Alzheimer's disease. Where is Xu Qiu? Take me to see him. Wang Ping and Director Lin looked at each other. Director Lin said, he is going to have an operation tonight and has to prepare for surgery in the afternoon. He may not have time to meet with you and Professor Lin. Academician Chen didn't think there was anything wrong with waiting for a junior, and said, it's okay, let's wait. Just in time, let's take a look at his surgical skills. Lin Xie also nodded, with a hint of unconfidence suddenly in his tone. Yes, let's learn more about it. Who can do this kind of brain surgery that everyone is afraid of? Wang Ping looked at the two people silently, the corner of his mouth twitched and he almost laughed. In these two people, he saw his former self. At first I thought I could be Xu Qiu's teacher, can lead Xu Qiu to the pinnacle of medical skills and academics. Later, I slowly realized that I was not qualified. I am afraid that Academician Chen, who has been a leader and teacher all his life, and Lin Xie, the leader in bone reconstruction, will soon embark on the path of doubting themselves. Su Shun spent the afternoon and half of the night preparing for the operation, complete various preoperative examinations, such as blood routine, blood coagulation, virus screening, etc. In addition, there are also physical preparations such as shaving the head and preparing the skin. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the emergency operation began quickly. Operation time, 19 to 09. Preoperative diagnosis, sphenoidal crest meningioma, surgery name, neuroendoscopic resection of skull-based tumors. Operating staff, the chief surgeon is Xu Qiu, first assistant, Director Lin. Second aid, third aid, others, omitted. Anesthesia method, general anesthesia with tracheal intubation. Before the operation begins, unexpectedly, Xu Qiu first performed a lumbar cistern catheter placement, which led to about 25 milliliters of cerebrospinal fluid. Laymen such as Wang Ping and Academician Chen did not understand the meaning of this move, but Director Lin's eyes widened, and he was completely convinced that Xu Qiu really had two brushes. Medical science is as separate as a mountain, and it is normal for others to not understand it, but for Director Lin, an expert in brain surgery, Xu Qiu can tell the depth with the first cut. Lumbar cistern catheter placement is a detail not recorded in textbooks, even in the literature. Few people mention it, unless one has performed hundreds or thousands of intracranial surgeries. It is impossible to have such experience. Director Lin said with approval in his tone, "Make a drainage tube to drain the hemorrhagic cerebrospinal fluid during the operation. Moreover, blood and vasoactive substances in the subarachnoid space can be rapidly drained. This will reduce or eliminate the stimulation of the cerebral blood vessels and meninges by blood and vasoactive substances, and facilitate the collapse of the brain tissue, facilitate surgical operations, open up the surgical field, and reduce the traction or damage to the brain tissue." Academician Chen and Lin Xie looked at each other. Are there really all-around geniuses? The operation begins. Xu Qiu's knife fell with the sound. At this moment, the pupils of the people around him shrank at the same time. They felt that Xu Qiu's temperament and eyes had changed, as if he had become a surgical master, and they were interns worshipping from the side. Xu Qiu ignored the glances around her. He was immersed in his surgical world. Cut through the layers of the scalp, mastoid spreader opens to expose the temporal bone. After drilling one hole, use a milling cutter to cut out the bone flap about 3 cm x 3 cm. Smooth the squamous part of the temporal bone to the bottom of the middle cranial fossa. During the minimally invasive craniotomy, a small accident occurred. The mastoid air cells are open. This can cause fluid to accumulate in the air cells, leading to infections such as mastoiditis. Everyone's expressions changed and they were worried. Xu Qiu calmly sealed the wound with bone wax. His expression was calm, as if he had expected everything. After the minimally invasive approach was successfully opened, Xu Qiu used bone-biting forceps and grinding drills to grind the sphenoid ridge flat, and then exposed the anterior clinoid process downward. Then, Xu Qiu took over the bipolar electrocoagulator and followed the middle meningeal artery. While electrocoagulating and cutting off the middle artery, he searched for the spinous foramen at the skull base. The middle meningeal artery is really like a traitor, leading the way for the queen, and was killed by the queen. In the operating room, Lin Xie suddenly made a joke. Xu Qiu stopped his hand, tilted his head, and looked at Lin Xie. "Who are you scolding, the queen?" The eyes of the people around him also gathered on Lin Xie at the same time. The latter laughed dryly twice. "I just saw that the atmosphere in the operating room was too boring, so I told a joke. Ha ha ha, ha, ha." No one laughed with him. Lin Xie quickly closed his mouth, as if nothing had happened, and looked back at the operating area. After dealing with the traitor's middle artery, the blood supply of the external carotid artery to the tumor was basically cut off. Then, Xu Qiu's movements became faster and faster. He cut the dura mater in a semi-arc shape with the sphenoid ridge as the center. He also cut the sylvian arachnoid membrane to expose the sylvian cistern and release the cerebrospinal fluid. Then, he accurately locked the carotid cistern, chiasm cistern, terminal plate cistern or interpeduncular cistern squeezed by the tumor, and exposed and opened them in turn. Automatic retractor. Xu Qiu's voice revealed calmness. The bottom surface of the frontal lobe and the temporal pole were lifted in two directions by the automatic retractor. Everyone looked into the surgical field. The next moment, everyone's face changed and their palms began to sweat crazily. Chapter 95: Unprecedented Surgical Difficulty. Dancing in the Dark. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This step is to open up the surgical field, enter the posterior cranial fossa, and find the tumor. However, the surgical field at this time did not become clear as the automatic retractor was lifted, and the lower part was still blocked by the bone structure. This means that there will be a lot of blind spots in the operation. At present, the surgeon has only 3 options. 1. Grind off the obstructing bone structure, but this will extend the operation time by about half an hour, and it may damage important structures such as the lab vein between the lateral fissure and the transverse sinus, and the lateral fissure vein of the sphenoparietal sinus. More importantly, even if the bone obstruction is ground off, there are still blind spots in the petrous bone to the middle slope, the posterior cranial fossa area, and especially the structure below the line of the internal auditory canal. this feeling is like taking a small blue pill at the risk of physical damage, working hard and sweating profusely, but in the end the other party yawned and said, it's better to use a toy. It's a thankless job. The second option is naturally to give up minimally invasive surgery and do a classic craniotomy directly. This was rejected at the beginning of the consultation. Using a classic craniotomy is almost a dead end. The last option is to change the minimally invasive approach, since the front door is blocked by a structure, then go through the back door. However, the front side is the most advantageous surgical approach. If it is temporarily changed to other places now, the risk is greater. Director Lin's pupils trembled slightly, and his brain was working quickly, trying to find a solution. This operation is like walking through a dark minefield. Everyone analyzed the most likely safe passage, but halfway through, they found that there was a wall in the dim front. At this time, if you rashly change other routes, you may detonate the mines under your feet at any time. Should you give up? It can only be regarded as a switch operation. Deputy Director Zhao looked at the stack of bone structures and felt his scalp numb. Everyone's face was also heavy. The so-called switch operation, that is, after the operation enters the deep part of the human body, if it is found that the tumor spread, anatomical abnormalities, multiple organ lesions, etc. indicate that the patient cannot withstand further surgical blows, the operation will be abandoned after evaluation, and the operation will be ended directly by flushing and suturing. After one switch on and one switch off, the doctor found that he was powerless and could only end it without doing anything. The anesthesiologist stopped playing with his phone at this time and leaned over to say, the area of ineffective exposure cannot be larger, otherwise the patient will not be able to leave. This is basically equivalent to a death sentence. The incision is too large, and the damage to the patient is beyond the controllable range, but, can a smaller incision be found? How is it possible? If it is really possible, it would have been discussed during the consultation. Just when the atmosphere was frozen to the extreme, a plain voice suddenly sounded. Scalpel. Everyone's face changed at the same time, and they looked at it with fear. I saw that Xu Qiu had already picked up the scalpel, and then put it down without hesitation, in an instant. At the transition between the transverse sinus and the sigmoid sinus, as the scalpel slid nimbly like a snake, an S shape appeared in front of us. Then, the periosteal stripper widely pushed the periosteum. The V-shaped flap opened the dura flap, the incision milled the bone flap, the 4-0 suture pulled. The dura mater, the hemostatic forceps clamped and suspended on the edge of the head. Gurgle -as the cerebrospinal fluid was slowly released. A narrow keyhole-shaped approach appeared in front of them. Everyone was hesitant. What's the use of opening such a small hole? I still can't see the surgical field. However, when Director Lin looked over, his pupils suddenly contracted and his face was full of shock. Is this the door and window effect? Director Lin was shocked. The door and window effect is also called the cat's eye principle. In simple terms, through a narrow cat's eye door mirror, you can see the outside clearly, and at this moment the keyhole opened by Xu Qiu is the cat's eye. The tiny incision opened in front of me. The surgical field is not as dark and narrow as expected, but exceptionally bright. The neurovascular structure of the ventral cranial fossa is clearly visible. Lin Xie, Academician Chen and others also widened their eyes, their expressions full of disbelief. Is this Dr. Xu? Oh my God, this is too fantastic. It can be saved. Dr. Xu, what is your limit? Did you record it? I want to sleep with the videotape. In the operating room, everyone's mood seemed to be on a roller coaster, rushing from the bottom to the top in an instant. Don't make noise. Dr. Xu has found the trochlear nerve, and the tentorium cerebelli is going to be cut. Director Lin suddenly shouted, and the operating room immediately returned to silence. A few seconds later, Director Lin's eyelids suddenly jumped violently, and he said after realizing it, so strong. The difficulty of this operation is unprecedented. Even Xu Qiu did not dare to be distracted at all, staring at the microscope, constantly performing microscopic separation. Drops of sweat appeared on his forehead. The figure was like a sculpture, with only the hand holding the knife moving and peeling with a tiny amplitude. Dr. Xu wiped the sweat. The circulating nurse moved very gently, and took advantage of the gap when Xu Qiu turned his head to wipe the sweat quickly. Through the gloves, the circulating nurse touched Xu Qiu's face. She deliberately pulled the gauze inwards and pretended to rub Xu Qiu's face with her fingers inadvertently. She was immediately overjoyed. It turns out that rubbing really makes you happy. On the operating table, Xu Qiu was completely unaware that he was being rubbed. He was concentrating on identifying the tumor and the blood vessels surrounding it under the microscope. Director Lin and others looked heavy and dared not breathe. The situation was very serious. The tumor was densely packed with blood vessels. The ones that could be identified were the internal carotid artery and the middle cerebral artery, and the optic nerve and ophthalmic artery were below. Swish dash, just as everyone was struggling with how to start the first cut. White smoke rose, and the smell of burnt flesh instantly filled the entire operating room. Xu Qiu took a bipolar electrocoagulator and electrocoagulated 2 centimeters on the outside of the tumor, and then cut it open. He stopped bleeding while cutting until the tumor was hollowed out. Snap dash at this moment, the tumor wall collapsed. Xu Qiu did not stop, and immediately took the knife and cut the tumor wall in pieces. Director Lin and others seemed to be holding their breath, staring at the surgical field. During the operation, Xu Qiu's scalpel passed over the brain stem several times, rubbing the cranial nerves, but it always stopped at the last moment. Click. 3 hours later, a huge meatball covered with burnt brown, with red tumor blood vessels, yellow-white tissue adhesions and black necrotic areas on the surface fell on the surgical tray. Gurgle. Suddenly, the sound of swallowing saliva was heard. After the electrocoagulation, the meatball exuded the aroma of barbecue. This was undoubtedly a huge temptation for everyone who had not had time to eat dinner. Why are you in a hurry? The operation is not over yet. Don't stare at the tumor and drool. I will treat everyone to supper after get off work. Director Lin said. He also secretly swallowed his saliva, but his eyes were still on the surgical area, and his expression did not relax at all. Now there is still a tricky problem. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will deal with it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Chapter 96 Creating History, Xu Qiu's Miracle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. During the operation, Xu Qiu made a quadrilateral and removed the surrounding bone. Add the previous temporal lateral gap. Now there are 2 places with defects. After the operation, how to fill the defects. Just when Director Lin was frowning, Genius's eyes suddenly lit up. He said in surprise. Before the operation, Dr. Su asked the family to sign an additional informed consent form. It was a resection of the outer thigh. Could it be used here? Director Lin's pupils shrank, and he figured it all out at once. Sure enough, after the tumor was removed, Xu Qiu took fat and myofascia from the outer thigh of the patient. Fat was filled in the bone defect of the minimally invasive incision. The surface was covered with myofascia. The outermost layer was fixed with biological protein glue. Artificial dura mater. Xu Qiu's voice was like a heavenly sound. As soon as the voice fell, the defect areas of the 2 minimally invasive incisions were tightly fitted with artificial dura mater. He methodically repositioned and fixed the skull. Then sutured the scalp and bandaged it in turn. The operation is over. Accompanied by Xu Qiu's tired voice, everyone just woke up from a dream. They stared at the big meatball blankly, still couldn't believe that this super difficult operation was over. Really did it? The leader of Daxia's neurosurgery is Tiandu Tiantan Hospital. Even they can't conquer the resection of the huge meningioma at the bottom of the middle cranial fossa. Dr. Su has done it. Dr. Su succeeded. Make history. Dr. Su is going to be on the news. Amid the cheers of the crowd, the operation came to an end. Outside the operating room, Su's wife was sitting in the waiting chair with her child in her arms, waiting. She looked anxious and panicked. She looked at the time every few seconds, and she was on the verge of collapse. For old people, some stared at the operating channel in a daze. And one old man paced back and forth and prayed, and slowly tears flowed from the deep eye sockets, crossing her vicissitudes of life. Face, bang, suddenly, the door of the operating corridor was pushed open. Everyone looked at the same time, with a pair of eyes full of expectation, fear, and helplessness. Xu Qiu, who walked out of the operating room, had pale lips, a mask-shaped outline on his face, and his hair was wet with sweat. The other doctors were the same, with a look of listlessness and embarrassment, full of unkempt ugliness. Only Xu Qiu, despite his tired eyes, had a messy hairstyle that added a bit of ruffian spirit, with a dash of unruly ruffian handsomeness. Doctor, Xu Shan's wife rushed over with the child, her voice trembling. The old people also staggered over, with a little tear flashing in their turbid eyes, facing these pairs of begging eyes. Xu Qiu's tired face suddenly broke into a smile, and he said easily, "The operation was very successful, and the patient will be pushed back to the ward later. Don't visit the ward before the nurse allows it." The family members were stunned for a moment, then they hugged each other and cried with joy. "Thank you, doctor. I really don't know how our family can survive without my husband. You saved our family. Quick, say thank you, doctor brother, thank the other doctors, uncles and grandfathers. Buddha bless my son Xu Shan, Buddha bless my daughter-in-law, bless my grandson, bless my mother-in-law. Buddha bless Xu Qiu." At this moment, the old man who had been praying all the time, after saying all the family members, added the name Xu Qiu. From this day on, there was a stranger among the family members. She begged for blessings. After the operation, all the people involved in the operation went to the barbecue restaurant in an orderly manner. I'm afraid the owner of the barbecue restaurant would not have thought that the 2 tables in the corner today were occupied by big names in the medical field such as Academician Chen and Lin Xie. Compared with these people, Xu Qiu is more noteworthy. At this moment, the beautiful daughter of the barbecue restaurant owner had twinkling peach blossom eyes, supported her snow-white chin, and kept secretly glancing at the direction where Xu Qiu was sitting. In order to avoid the alcohol, Director Lin condescended to get the wine. When he noticed the girl's gaze, he smiled knowingly and said, "Little girl, don't you think the 2 people sitting next to him are more elegant? That is a medical big shot that can only be seen in textbooks." The girl shook her head and said, "I don't care, that brother looks more powerful." Director Lin wanted to refute, but he suddenly thought that one day in the future, Xu Qiu's status will really far exceed that of Academician Chen and Lin Xie. The latter 2 left a name in a certain medical field, and Xu Qiu, maybe he can set up milestones in the human medical community. You are right, he will be more powerful in the future. Director Lin took a few bottles of white wine and was about to go back, but he suddenly noticed that there was a bottle of yogurt in the middle. "I didn't order this." Director Lin was about to return it. The girl's face flushed, and she said boldly, "I see that brother doesn't drink, I'll give him a bottle of yogurt, free." "Ha ha ha, okay, I'll help you convey it." Director Lin grabbed the yogurt, which was still warm. The barbecue restaurant didn't have a microwave, and I didn't know where the girl heated it. After a while, Director Lin returned to his seat. The girl looked at him from a distance. Xu Qiu took the yogurt calmly, cast his eyes over here, and nodded slightly at her. At this moment, the girl felt that spring had come. At the dinner table, Xu Qiu was always the core of the topic. After talking about interesting things in the department for a while, they would return to Xu Qiu. "Too self-disciplined. To be honest, you are more like a neurosurgeon than us. In order to maintain the accuracy and stability of your hands, you don't drink a drop of wine. Brother Xu, I admire you." Zhongwen drank a few glasses and his face turned red. "Brother Zhong, you are 29 years old. What's the point of calling Dr. Xu Brother Xu?" "Right, Mr. Xu." Shen Shanyu, who was sitting at another table, raised his glass to salute. After a while, everyone burst into laughter again. After eating a few more rounds, Lin Xie and Dean Chen were a little restless. Lin Xie took a big sip of wine, put down the wine glass and said, "Xu Qiu, you make me embarrassed to speak now. You can do such a difficult neurosurgery. If I ask you to do bone reconstruction again, it would be a waste of your talent in neurosurgery." Academician Chen also took a sip of white wine, and took a deep breath because of the spiciness, and then said faintly, "I would like you to follow me to do hepatobiliary and pancreatic surgery, but your extracerebral endoscopy is really inferior to me." Everyone quieted down and looked at Xu Qiu at the same time. They really want to know how Xu Qiu will respond to the invitation of these 2 medical leaders. These 2 are both influential figures that even the dean of Linhai First Hospital can't afford to offend. Before Xu Qiu answered, Academician Chen stood up tremblingly, and said with the help of alcohol. Xu Qiu, I'm telling you the truth. Chapter 97 Among Humans, sing the good news of your conquest of disease, more updates. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As for me, I have personally accepted 33 apprentices in this life. There are quite a few wolf cubs among them. I taught them everything I knew, but in the end, 7 or 8 of them ran away. They slipped away to foreign countries. They took their teacher's hard work of half a lifetime to foreign countries. However, even if a few of the most talented ones ran away, I am not exaggerating to say that 80% of the doctors in the country who are engaged in hepatobiliary and pancreatic diseases are my students, or the students of my students. In this life, my energy is almost exhausted. I have 2 or 3 research projects under my hands, but I am sure that I will not see the results. I know you may not be interested in conquering the unmanned area in the field of hepatobiliary and pancreatic diseases, and I don't expect you to follow me back to do scientific research and practice medical skills. But I hope you can stay in our country. Be a good doctor for our people. Academician Chen was passionate and generous, and he looked at Xu Qiu. For some reason, he seemed to see his own shadow in Xu Qiu. This is so strange. He, an old man who has been fighting for human medicine all his life, actually saw the same temperament and spirit in a young man in his 20s. How is this possible? This kind of eyes that have experienced so many things but still carry sincere love, it is impossible to have it unless you return to the state of returning to nature in your 70s or 80s, right? Academician Chen shook his head and denied this idea. He patted Xu Qiu on the shoulder and said earnestly, I hope you can seek good news for more than 1 billion patients suffering from digestive diseases, bring hope to tens of millions of patients who are waiting to die and have no medicine or treatment. These words were deafening, and the barbecue restaurant was silent all of a sudden. The people who were drinking at several tables around were quiet at this moment, silently looking at Academician Chen. Who is he? Someone quickly took out his mobile phone. Someone quickly searched he is the teacher of hepatobiliary and pancreatic doctors .. And Academician Chen's information immediately popped up on the mobile phone. At this moment, everyone in the barbecue restaurant was shocked, with ecstatic expressions. A Daxia hepatobiliary and pancreatic academician was eating barbecue in the same restaurant with them. But who is that handsome guy? Yes. Academician Chen actually gave him such a high evaluation. Oh my God, he must be a future academician. The academician actually said that he can treat terminally ill patients in the future. Who is this person? People kept looking at Xu Qiu, their eyes were full of doubts, but more of them were deeply shocked. After Academician Chen said this, he sat down again. Lin Xie was a little embarrassed. Damn, you are so awesome and have such a high level. I just said wasted the talent of brain surgery. I am so embarrassed. This bone is good, this is cartilage, there are nutrient blood vessels inside. Little sister, bring a straw. Lin Xie laughed, skillfully knocked open the weakest part of the bone, and prepared to suck the bone marrow. Every profession has its own specialty. The people around him smiled with ambiguous meanings. Lin Xie sucked a mouthful of bone marrow, returned to the key question, and asked, Xu Qiu, will you come with me to do bone reconstruction? Xu Qiu smiled and said, if I am not mistaken, the current dilemma of bone reconstruction should be technology. Lin Xie was stunned, and felt a little happy. It seems that Xu Qiu is still concerned about the bone reconstruction industry. He smiled and said, yes, what we are mainly doing now is to find a more perfect bone reconstruction prosthesis. Moreover, the core technology of prosthesis reconstruction, 3D printing, is still under development. Both at home and abroad are pursuing more advanced technology and materials that are closer to human bones. Xu Qiu looked calm and said, in other words, bone reconstruction is a field limited by technology and the times. Lin Xie's expression stagnated. He was silent for a moment, and said, you are right, technology must develop first, and then slowly drive our field. After hearing Xu Qiu's words, he had a bad feeling in his heart. Sure enough, after Lin Xie finished speaking, Xu Qiu continued, so, it doesn't make much sense for me to study bone reconstruction with you. The upper limit of this technology is there, and no matter how high it is, it can't transcend the current technological constraints. Yes. Lin Xie felt a little disappointed. It seems that Xu Qiu is not going to do bone reconstruction. Missing a top talent like this is a huge loss for the entire industry. At this time, Xu Qiu spoke again. He said lightly, "However, Professor Lin, I will not give up the field of bone reconstruction. If I have time, I will study new reconstruction prostheses. Compared with surgery, this is the key to promote the development of bone reconstruction." Lin Xie suddenly raised his head, with a look of surprise, and said, "Okay. As long as you are willing to study reconstruction. What help do you need from me, Xu Qiu? I haven't started yet, but I promise that within 5 years, I will give you a valuable prosthesis reconstruction plan. If there are any difficulties, I will come to you for help." Lin Xie took a sip of wine and said excitedly, "No problem. As long as you ask, even if it is a national-level prosthesis research and development center laboratory, I will open all licenses to you." Xu Qiu didn't have time to respond. The old voice of academician Chen came from the side, and he said faintly, "As for me, I may not have 5 years to wait." Hearing this, everyone's mood suddenly dropped for a moment. Yes, academician Chen is old. When he was young, he flew domestically and abroad every day. In the craziest 10 years, he basically spent his birthday on the plane every year. At that time, he was full of energy, as if he would never get tired or old, but now, just flying from Tiandu to Linhai is very strenuous for him. However, in order to see Xu Qiu, he still came in person, just to say don't let patients be hopeless and have no treatment and be a good doctor for the people of Daxia. A trace of sadness flashed through Xu Qiu's heart. He used yogurt instead of wine and promised, "Academician Chen, I will let you see that Daxia doctors have pushed the diagnosis and treatment of hepatobiliary and pancreatic diseases to a new height." This sentence is very important. So much so that all the doctors present were shocked, with incredible expressions on their faces. The development of hepatobiliary and pancreatic is already very mature. In recent years, there is only one academician Chen who has created the Chen's kissing method. Xu Qiu's dream is even bigger than academician Chen's. Everyone found it unbelievable, but academician Chen's old face suddenly broke into a smile. He poured a small glass of white wine, clinked it with Xu Qiu, looked at Xu Qiu trustfully with a wise look, and said, "I believe you, I wait for you." A night of hearty eating and drinking. Everyone was full of food and wine, and the mood was particularly relaxed. Being able to perform such a difficult operation and save a family is one aspect, and Linhai First Hospital will also be on the news because of this operation, and it will be popular. Director Lin said mysteriously. "Do you know why I am so happy that this operation was successful?" Everyone's attention was attracted. Director Lin is usually a stingy person, and this is the first time he has invited the department to dinner. "No wonder you are willing to treat us, old Lin. It turns out there is an inside story." Wang Ping scolded with a smile. Director Lin nodded with a smile. "You guessed right, I know some inside information." Zhong Wen and others finally reacted. No wonder Director Lin plucked his hair. "Something big is going on. Tell me quickly. Director Lin, don't keep us in suspense." Chapter 98, Ability Like a Cheat, I Have to Show Off. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xu Qiu also looked over. Director Lin lowered his voice and said, "You all know that Tiandu's Tiantan Hospital is one of the 3 neurosurgery centers in the world, right? These days, there is a rumor that the country plans to build Daxia's second neurosurgery center. It is expected to build another neurosurgery clinical, scientific research, and teaching base. The Neurosurgery Research Institute of Linhai City has handed this task to us. Coincidentally, Xu Qiu has completed another significant operation at this juncture, which is equivalent to a shot of adrenaline for us to fight for the neurosurgery center." Everyone showed a surprised expression. If Linhai First Hospital can really win this quota, it will become a neurosurgery holy land in southern Daxia. And further study and scientific research cannot be avoided here. The influence of the hospital will naturally reach an unprecedented height, Director Lin added. "In a few days, our department will hold an academic exchange meeting." It is called an academic exchange meeting. But it is also to show the level of neurosurgery in our hospital. The professors of Tiantan Hospital and the expert group of Daxia Neurosurgery Research Institute will participate. In addition, there are several foreign doctors, among them is a famous neurosurgeon from China, who is world-renowned for intracranial tumors, especially skull base and brainstem surgical treatment. Originally, we planned to let Zhongwen be the youth representative, but now it seems that the candidate will be replaced by Xu Qiu. Zhongwen was very convinced and said, "I am not as good as Brother Xu." Director Lin was afraid that Xu Qiu would refuse, so he added, "Don't worry, you just need to spare a morning. You don't have to talk during the whole process, just treat it as a lecture. By the way, you have to cooperate with the medical propaganda department to take a few photos, publish news in 2 days, and print dozens of brochures by the way." Xu Qiu, "Oh, okay." Everyone was used to Xu Qiu's calmness, and they were relieved to see Xu Qiu agreed. After drinking a few more glasses, the party finally ended. After returning home, Xu Qiu opened the system immediately. Sure enough, sincere thanks from colleagues was completed. It was Jian who expressed his sincere gratitude to Xu Qiu. This doctor of medicine from the countryside was moved by Xu Shun's family and decided to take a risk, and Xu Qiu's action not only saved the family, but also saved Jian in some ways. Ding! Difficult task completed. Congratulations on winning the reward. Popular support. Popular support. The more colleagues observe, the higher your surgical success rate will be, and your surgical ability will also be improved to a certain extent. The higher the medical skills of the observer, the better the bonus effect. Xu Qiu was a little surprised. This ability is just like a cheat. If the operating room can be broadcast live, when performing surgery, he directly invites doctors from all over the world to watch together. Wouldn't he be able to do even a head transplant? Let's take a step back. Even if there is no live broadcast, Xu Qiu can challenge many difficult surgeries just by relying on the number of observers for each operation, such as the craniocerebral separation of conjoined twins, bilateral prefrontal lobotomy and so on. It's perfect for showing off. Xu Qiu shook his head. He is a low-key person. The more people he has, the more awesome he is. This ability is driving him to be high-profile. After receiving the reward, Xu Qiu simply washed his face and returned to the long table with a basin of soapy water. He rubbed a few bubbles in the basin, then, he slid his palm across the table and picked up the needle holder. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A series of afterimages passed through Xu Qiu's hand, and the curved needle shuttled quickly on the soap bubble. In the blink of an eye, a row of fine sutures appeared on it, as if floating on the surface of the bubble film. Ding! Suturing proficiency plus 0.5%. Half an hour later, as this voice sounded, Xu Qiu felt that his control over the needle had increased a few points. The next day, after the morning shift, the emergency department began to be busy during the day again. After Xu Qiu finished his outpatient clinic, he was checking the medical records in his office when someone from the medical publicity department came. "Dr. Xu, you continue to work, don't worry about me, I'll take some handsome photos from different angles." The beautiful head of the medical publicity department held the camera on her chest, looking left and right, back and forth. Her brows suddenly frowned. Xu Qiu took a look. "What's wrong?" The head of the medical publicity department waved his hands quickly and said, "I found that Dr. Xu, you are so handsome from any angle." Xu Qiu said he was used to it. He turned his head and looked at the medical records in the computer. The patient is still interesting. This idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, the peripheral blood and bone marrow are very typical. The blood count of the patient in bed 17 has increased to 14,500, neutrophil 76%, and it is considered to be meningitis to be investigated. Kakaka. On the side, the photographer quickly took a few photos of Xu Qiu. Then, she waited quietly by the side. It was not until Xu Qiu finished processing the medical records that she stammered, "Dr. Xu, I've taken the photos. Add me on WeChat. I'll send them to you after I've processed them." "Oh." In the department, the other female doctors immediately became alert. "Damn it, I didn't even give Dr. Xu a call, but he added me on WeChat. Wang Fan, there's a scary patient here, go quickly." At this time, a young nurse poked her head out and looked into the office. After scanning around, she didn't find Wang Fan, but she saw Xu Qiu instead. She smiled sweetly and said, "Hey, good afternoon, Dr. Xu. I'll go look for Wang Fan elsewhere, and maybe hide in the lounge again." Xu Qiu stood up and said, "I'll go." The little nurse denied it 3 times. "This is not okay, no, Dr. Xu, you have to take a break at noon." Xu Qiu passed by the little nurse, brought up a gust of wind, and said, "Lead the way." The little nurse walked in front with a blushing face, looking for the hateful Wang Fan along the way. In the disposal room, 4 or 5 family members were waiting outside anxiously, their fingers turning white from being pinched. Xu Qiu guessed that there was a child inside before she even saw the patient. Only in the pediatrics and obstetrics departments, a large group of family members will come with them when seeing a doctor. In some cases, even the baby's relatives will come, and more than a dozen people will surround one doctor. It is quite Zhuge Liang's courage to fight with the Confucian scholars. In contrast, when the elderly see a doctor, the better ones have their wives accompanying them. More often than not, the children pushed each other around, and finally one of them came over reluctantly and had a bad attitude towards the doctor. Of course, the worst offenders are actually middle-aged people. Middle-aged people often come to the hospital alone. There are elderly people above who rely on him for support, and children below are waiting for him to provide living expenses. The boss in the company is still urging progress. They may have to make 4 or 5 phone calls once to see a doctor, and they insist on only taking medicines and not infusions, let alone hospitalization. The burden of life does not allow them to get sick. Why is he such a young doctor? As soon as they reached the treatment room, several family members began to look impatient when they saw Xu Qiu's thick hair. The little nurse put her hands on her hips and said fiercely, "Dr. Xu is very professional. Besides, it is the lunch break now and all the doctors are eating. Dr. Xu is here specifically to see you. If you don't want to wait until you go to work in the afternoon." Okay, come and take a look quickly." The family members urged impatiently. Xu Qiu's expression did not change and she walked into the observation room, just glancing at the patient on the bed, his brows wrinkled slightly. Chapter 99, The Medicine Cures the Disease, The Miracle Dr. Xu Qiu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shocking, this was the first impression. On the bed was a boy of 7 or 8 years old, with dense red rashes on his exposed face and neck. It would be more appropriate to say that the rash had eyes and noses. Lifting the quilt, the boy had bruises of all sizes all over his body, which looked very creepy. "Have you done a blood routine?" Xu Qiu asked. The boy's physical signs looked like spontaneous skin and mucous membrane bleeding. Bruise may be intradermal or subcutaneous bleeding points. However, the density of this bleeding is a bit too high. It's like a map of human skin. In this case, the first thing to be alert to is thrombocytopenia. Platelets are a component of blood, and their main function is to stop bleeding. The normal platelet count is between 100 and 300 units. Once the platelet count is less than 10, there is a risk of life. Platelet suspension must be transfused immediately to prevent intracranial hemorrhage. It's done, and we're still waiting for the results. We came from the community hospital. The boy's mother said in a panic. Xu Qiu, where are the medical records and examination reports? The boy's mother said, the community said that there is no need to transfer to another hospital, but my baby is in such a state, we are afraid. So we didn't complete the discharge procedures and sent him here directly. Xu Qiu understood. No wonder there are no medical records and examination reports. It turns out that he slipped out. He glanced at the boy. Such severe spontaneous bleeding, estimated that the blood routine is not optimistic, so he asked the nurse to prepare platelet suspension and various fluid replacement measures first. Here, Xu Qiu asked about the condition. How long have these symptoms lasted? Are you weak, have a fever, vomit or have diarrhea? Have you taken any medicine? After the consultation, Xu Qiu gave the boy a detailed physical examination. The liver and spleen were not enlarged by palpation. Auscultation was normal. Xu Qiu frowned slightly, and he checked the boy's mouth again. The family was terrified. There were a lot of purple, red and black mucosal injuries in the boy's mouth, and at a glance, it was almost filled with various blood blisters. How could this happen? It didn't seem like it happened before. Doctor, please save my child. The family members panicked, and several elders stamped their feet in anxiety, wishing that these blood blisters would grow on themselves. Xu Qiu called the laboratory department. Dr. Gu, there is a boy in the emergency department, please help me deal with it urgently. Okay. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, the test report came out. Xu Qiu quickly took a look. White blood cells were normal, red blood cells and hemoglobin were low, severe anemia. The most important thing is, platelets 9 times 10 to the power of 9 divided by L, normal value, 300 times 10 to the power of 9 divided by L. Such a small number of platelets means that the patient's hemostatic ability is sharply reduced, and intracranial hemorrhage may occur at any time, leading to death. Fluid replacement. Infuse platelet suspension. Xu Qiu put down the test sheet, his voice calm and calm. The nurse also breathed a sigh of relief and quickly followed the doctor's instructions. Fortunately, Dr. Su had anticipated it in advance, otherwise it might take dozens of minutes to wait for the report from the laboratory and then go to dispense the medicine. Go for a bone marrow examination, it is most likely ITP. Xu Qiu said, ITP, or idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura, this is an autoimmune disease. The clinical feature is an abnormal immune system, which leads to thrombocytopenia. The main manifestation is bleeding in the skin and mucous membranes. The most dangerous sign is oral blood blisters. This means that the patient is at high risk of intracranial hemorrhage. When he saw the boy's large-scale oral mucosal damage, Xu Qiu had already guessed that he had severe ITP. However, the final diagnosis requires another bone marrow smear examination. This examination usually takes 3 to 7 days to get the results in the outpatient department, but it will be much faster in the emergency department, especially when the doctor who wrote the order is called Xu Qiu. At around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the boy's bone marrow examination results were printed out. There is an increase in megakaryocytes and maturation disorders, nuclear lobes are reduced, and nuclear cytoplasmic development is unbalanced, typical ITP laboratory manifestations. Xu Qiu silently read the checklist for a while, and understood why the community hospital said that there was no need for referral. Prescribe dexamethasone, 1.5 mg intravenous drip. After the symptoms are relieved, change to oral prednisone. After the doctor's order was issued, that night, the boy was admitted to the hospital for treatment. The family spent the night worriedly. The next day, the first ray of sunlight in the morning shone into the ward, and the boy's mother woke up. Her eyes were haggard, and she was about to touch her son's forehead, but she was suddenly stunned. After just one night of treatment, most of the bruises on her son's face disappeared. She quickly woke up her husband next to her, and called the boy's grandfather and grandfather. The family admired the child's gradually returning to normal and cried with joy. Xu Qiu originally expected that he might need 3 days of dexamethasone. As a result, the boy was almost healed on the 3rd day, and his platelets gradually recovered and were out of danger. The family was discharged from the hospital. Before being discharged, the family held Xu Qiu's hand, crying. Wow, I was so scared, I thought my baby was going to die. I'm sorry, we shouldn't have questioned you. Yes, he is such a good doctor. I will give you a banner when we get back. Thank you so much. The family members apologized and thanked Xu Qiu. After seeing off the family, Xu Qiu returned to the office and sighed softly. This boy had actually been diagnosed with idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura in the community hospital. This disease has a very low chance of death, however, the acute bleeding stage is very scary. There will be dense bleeding spots on the body, which looks scary. Therefore, many community hospitals and private hospitals are happy to accept such patients. The reason is, it's not too dangerous. What's more important is that glucocorticoids, such as dexamethasone, prednisone and other drugs, are very effective in treating ITP. It is so obvious that if you take the medicine in the morning, the symptoms will disappear immediately in the evening, and you don't even need to be hospitalized. This leads to, some hospitals will deliberately give some second-line drugs to extend the length of hospitalization. After 4 or 5 days, the glucocorticoid will be given again. One injection will take effect and the disease will be cured. Certainly, most tertiary public hospitals disdain this, because the hospital beds in the top 3 hospitals are too tight. They have no intention of doing these little tricks, and ITP patients take medicine, come in today and be discharged tomorrow. They have to write a hospitalization record after staying for half a day, which will put a lot of burden on the doctor. Click. Xu Qiu closed the boy's hospitalization medical record. This medical record is finally over. Shortly after sending the family away, the emergency department hall ushered in another wave of patients. Before the office doctor could take a bite of food, he was dispatched again. Each doctor leads a lucky audience, or go to the observation room, or rescue room, or treatment room. A few hours later, Xu Qiu finally finished her work and was about to go back to the office to rest for a while, when she suddenly stopped. Chapter 100 Anaphylactic Shock, Dead Child. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The door of the office was once again surrounded by a group of people. Several doctors were blocked in the office. There were several doctors outside. Some of them had just finished operations and wanted to go in and rest for a while, but they were also stopped at this moment. Before Xu Qiu could figure out what was going on, Deputy Chief He arrived from the other side. As soon as he saw the person blocking the door, his face darkened and he said, "What are you doing?" That the leader was a man with a sinister look on his face. He said viciously, "Hospitalize me. My son needs to be hospitalized. The beds in our department are full, go to other hospitals." He said with a grim expression. Xu Qiu and others all knew that this was an excuse, but he wondered why He, who always thought about patients, refused without asking about the situation. At this time, Wang Ping stood next to Xu Qiu. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked at this scene without saying a word. "Do you know why?" Wang Ping looked at Xu Qiu. Xu Qiu shook his head. A hint of disgust flashed across Wang Ping's face, and he said, "This family has forgotten what they have done." He talked about the past few months ago. 7 months ago, an old lady in her 70s was admitted to the emergency department. She passed out at home, and her family found her half an hour later. When he was brought in, the emergency department diagnosed cerebral infarction and spared no effort to rescue him, but the family found it too late. After being rescued, although her life was saved, the old lady still suffered from the sequelae of cerebral infarction. Logically speaking, this kind of patient needs a single room and someone to stay with him in bed, but the family still left the old lady alone in the ward. One night, the old lady ran to the toilet by herself, perhaps because she had an urgent need to urinate. As a result, he was unable to move properly and broke his arms and legs. The next day, all the family members who had not been seen for several days came. The man with a fleshy face blocked the door of the office, followed by a large number of tattooed socialites, and asked the hospital to pay 1 million yuan. The hospital had long expected medical trouble. There was a recording asking family members to stay with him in bed, but the family members themselves refused. If something goes wrong, the hospital naturally doesn't have much responsibility. After all, it is impossible for doctors and nurses to focus on a certain patient at night. However, out of humanistic care, the hospital is still willing to compensate 10,000 yuan. The arrogant man refused and left the old lady alone in the hospital. Everyone in the emergency department is not a cold-blooded animal, so they helped the old lady deal with the fracture. Some of the nurses and doctors in the department bought the old lady food, and some helped the old lady move her limbs to avoid bedsores, thinking that they could influence the old lady. The old lady also received the service as a matter of course. A month passed like this, and she still refused to leave. Wang Ping went over to talk in person, and the old lady said with a straight face, "It is only natural for you to take care of me. If you don't give me 1 million, I will not be discharged from the hospital even if I die." Calls to her son were ignored. Calling the police is useless. In the end, even the police became impatient and said that he would be discharged directly. The department also agreed. They didn't even pay the more than 10,000 yuan in hospitalization fees they owed, and they were forcibly discharged from the hospital. After that, no one took care of the old lady's meals, and no one delivered her medicine. The medical staff walked around the ward when they saw her. The family members are also stubbornly opposed to the hospital. After a month, the old lady died. As a result, half a year later, this cruel-faced man still wants his son to be hospitalized here. Wang Ping sighed helplessly. Our nurses and doctors are afraid that their mother will starve to death, so they will still give her some food. But as a son, he would rather wait for the news of his mother's death. The old lady was also shameless. We had done everything we were supposed to do, and she still wanted to extort a sum of money from us before she died. We will not accept this kind of person in this kind of family. This is not a patient, this is a tumor that grows in hospitals. Wang Ping called the security office directly. Not long after, a group of heavily armed security guards came in a hurry and drove these vicious socialites out. Before leaving, the man with a fleshy face glared at the doctor in the hospital with evil eyes. Wang Ping clasped his hands behind his back and sighed, "This is not a person who wants to be cured. All he wants is to pay compensation." Wang Ping's guess was correct. A few days later, something happened at the People's Hospital in the city. A child died of anaphylactic shock, and his family held a banner outside the hospital to defend their rights. In the photos taken by the media, the family member holding the banner is the man with a sinister face. Naturally, Corey's doctor also knew about this. Yunmei patted her chest and said, "Fortunately, the director drove them away, otherwise we would be the unlucky ones." Qin Jia sucked the yogurt and said, "Yes, I heard that the nurse specifically asked him if the child was allergic to penicillin, and he said no, absolutely not." The nurse was a little confused at the time, and most people would not be so sure, but the man urged him very urgently, and there were a lot of social people around him. The nurse was scolded and cried, so she had no choice but to inject the child. Several doctors sighed one after another. Wang Fan was itching with hatred and said, "My mother died and my son died too, just for money. This kind of person really deserves to go to hell." Zhou Hua also expressed his approval and added, "Anyway, I heard that the final compensation was more than 700,000 yuan. The nurse was also fired and her license was revoked. Tiger poison does not eat its seeds, it is more poisonous than a tiger." Everyone was cursing while processing the medical records. For a moment, they felt that the patients in their department were so cute and kind. Beep, beep. Suddenly, the sound of an urgent ambulance came from outside the hospital. The beautiful female Dr. Yunmei rushed over first. The ambulance brought a middle-aged woman in her 40s. Her eyes were so swollen that she couldn't open them, her whole body was hot, and even her breath was burning, her skin was red all over. What's more terrifying is that her breathing amplitude is very scary. If an experienced doctor, he can tell at a glance that this is nodding breathing before dying. "Send her to the emergency room quickly. Blood pressure, 7 Hg, normal value 9140/6090, heart rate, 150 beats per minute. Normal value 6100. Shock." Yunmei immediately determined the cause of the disease. Shock leads to low blood pressure, causing brain hypoxia, and then brain dysfunction leading to coma. As soon as the medical history was asked, the family member's voice trembled and he cried, "My wife got an 4 at a nearby clinic and became like this. Doctor, please save my wife." Yunmei frowned. She immediately thought of the child who died of anaphylactic shock in the People's Hospital. Obviously, the patient at the moment also meets the symptoms of anaphylactic shock. Only anaphylactic shock can attack so rapidly. Immediately subcutaneously inject 1 ml of 0.1% epinephrine hydrochloride. Intravenous injection of dexamethasone 20 mg, hydrocortisone 300 mg. Quickly drip 800 ml of balancing solution, and then give 5% glucose. Without any hesitation, Yunmei immediately started anti-allergic treatment. After more than a minute of rescue, the patient's fingers suddenly moved. She slowly opened her eyes, and consciousness seemed to be recovering, but at this moment, Yunmei's face suddenly changed drastically.